Let's look at how we can define a custom value or even multiple values or settings that our app may need. So the first thing I'm going to do is come into services. Now I could put this wherever I want again, but I usually put values and constants in my services folder. So we'll create a new file, and I'm just going to call this values.js. Now all we have to do is get into Angular module, give it the name, which is customer's app in this case, and then say .value. Now the value takes a string, which is your key, and then an object of some type. Now it could be a string, it could be just a number, it can even be an object literal. So one thing I like to do is if we had some app settings, in fact I'm just going to call this key app settings, then I can make an object literal here. And now what I can do is provide my different settings. So let's say that we had an app title, and we'll just call this customer's application, and maybe we had a version, and we'll pretend we're on 1.0 here. And that's all you would have to do to make this into a value that can be accessible throughout the application. Now, because we did a value though, these settings will not be available in the config function. But we could come in and do this and make a constant. So we just change this to constant. Now, just as a quick review, if we go back to app.js and I wanted to get to those, then I could put app settings, and the constant is injectable into the config, whereas the value is not. Now, I don't need those there, so I'm just going to go ahead and go back to values, comment this out, and we're just going to use the value, and let's see what we can do with that. Okay, so let's come on in, and we'll come in maybe to our customers view. We have our customers, and maybe instead of calling it customers, I would like to call it whatever the app setting is. So because our values had a value of title, maybe I want to use that value. Well, I need to expose that through the scope. So let's come into the customer's controller. And in addition to the factory here, I'm going to pass in app settings. And then we'll have to, of course, do the same thing here. And now that's going to be accessible. So now I can simply say scope.app settings equals the app settings. I'll just define that directly and assign it. Now we can come into the view, and if we don't want to hard code this, we can come in and say app settings.title. And maybe just on the home page, we want to come down and let's add a little footer section here. And we could write out app settings.version. And all that will do is simply pull out the title, and it's going to pull out the version and write those out. All this is really buying us is we can now go to a centralized place to put things like app settings. Now, you may say, well, why not just stick that in your factory? And you certainly could. But values and constants provide a way to give more of a basic type of settings that are global to an app and not specific to factories, controllers, services, or other types of components in your app. Now that we have the title and version in place, let's go ahead and run it. So I'm actually going to add one more line break, and let's make sure we do identify this as the version. Come back to the shell, and we should see customer's application at the top. There we go, and we have our version is 1.0. So that's obviously pulling from the app settings that we defined using the value function.